everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie and this is all about my life after gastric bypass surgery. Today's video is all about weight loss surgery slang and terminology. I've been wanting to do this video for a while because there are a lot of acronyms and slang and terminology that people use in the weight loss surgery community that I've noticed not everybody knows what it means or why it's used. So I've put together a list of terms in no particular order that are used somewhat frequently or I think would be helpful to understand fully. Number one, VSG or sleeve. So the VSG surgery is the vertical sleeve gastrectomy, and it's also known as the sleeve. And this is one of several weight loss surgery options, and it's honestly, I think, one of the more popular, more common ones to be done lately. And that's the one where they remove about 80% of the stomach in order to create a sleeve, or sometimes referred to as a pouch, as your new stomach. For the sleeve surgery, that is basically it. It is a much simpler process that really just involves making the stomach itself smaller. In contrast, the other major surgery that is done most often is the RNY Gastric Bypass. Now, RNY actually stands for Roux-en-Y, and it is for César Roux, who's the surgeon who developed the surgery, and the Y is because it kind of looks like a Y when you reroute the intestines, as shown here. This surgery is more complicated than the sleeve because it not only includes making a smaller pouch and cutting away part of the stomach, but it also includes the rerouting of your intestines so that you bypass a section of the small intestine. Now, of course, those are quick and dirty definitions of both surgeries. There's a lot more involved to both. Number three is WLS, which, if you don't know by now, is the common abbreviation people use for weight loss surgery. Number four is macros. Typically when people are discussing macros, they are talking about the protein, carb, and fat amounts in the food that they're eating. Now, sometimes people can include sugar or fiber in these macros, but most of the time you're going to see the protein, carb, and fat content because those are the three that we're really focused on after surgery. You really should be focusing on high protein, moderate fat, lowish carbs. Number five, food funerals. People will talk about food funerals when they're talking about pre-op or right before they go on the pre-op diet. And a food funeral is just exactly what it sounds like. Food that you're afraid that you're not going to be able to eat again, or food that you're committing to cutting out of your life, and therefore you indulge and enjoy that food before you go through this process. There's a lot of complicated, mixed feelings about food funerals. I think as long as you're not going overboard and going crazy and putting that much emphasis and importance on food, there's really nothing wrong with having a food funeral. I was worried personally about my taste changing after surgery, and so there were a couple of dishes that I made sure to have before I started the pre-op diet, just in case it was the last time I was ever really going to eat them again. I've been lucky and there hasn't been anything that has really made me sick or anything that I've been too upset over cutting out of my life. So, a food funeral can be a perfectly healthy way to move through this process. Number six, dumping. Dumping can occur both with the sleeve and with bypass, although the nature of what dumping is really makes it more common with the bypass surgery. Essentially, dumping is when food, and more particularly like sugary foods, dump into your small intestines too quickly. And it can cause people to feel really sick, get a rapid heart rate, feel like they need to lay down, or feeling lightheaded. You could throw up or have diarrhea. There's a lot of different reactions that could happen with dumping syndrome. Now with the sleeve surgery, anatomically your stomach is the same aside from the fact that a chunk of it has been lopped off and it's smaller. So you still have your pyloric sphincter, which is what regulates how much food is put into your intestines at a time. That's why dumping is way more common to happen with gastric bypass, because your intestines are now attached to your stomach in a different place, and the ability for food to move from the stomach to the intestines is no longer regulated by your pyloric sphincter, which means that easily things can get pushed into your intestines too quickly if you eat too much, too fast, or if you drink right after eating. Number 7 is a stall. Now you're going to get kind of wildly differing opinions on how long a stall is, but when people are discussing stalls, they're talking about not losing weight for a certain amount of time. So if somebody's been stalled for a week, they haven't lost any weight, or maybe they've gone up and down, but essentially have stayed the same from week after week. Sometimes people experience a week-long stall, and sometimes people experience stalls that happen for months on end. It's completely normal for these things to happen. It's okay to reassess what your macros are and what your food intake is and try to tackle it from that point of view, but it's also completely fine to just let it happen and continue on the course, because stalls will happen and your body will periodically need to readjust as you're going through this process. This is something that your body's not really used to, and eating too much or too little can easily affect your weight loss. I personally consider a stall to be something that's going on for 2 or more weeks. I think with 1 week, it can totally be a fluke and just nothing at all could be causing it. But if you have 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row where you're not losing weight, then I think that it can be considered a stall, and you might want to reassess what's going on, or at least pay more attention to it, especially if you're very early on after surgery, because very little things can affect that. Number 8 is Proffee. Proffee is sweeping the nation, and all it stands for is protein coffee. And you'll see in the weight loss surgery community, a lot of people have protein coffees, especially in the morning for breakfast. I personally have a protein coffee every morning because I can't really eat solid food in the morning without it making me feel unsettled, but I find that a protein shake always sits pretty well, and there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of caffeine and really, getting things going with some coffee in the morning. So that's, I think, why you see a lot of Proffee in this community. Number 9 are these acronyms that you will probably see all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, and it's what people commonly use for their information and their backgrounds and their bios. They stand for highest weight, surgery weight, current weight, and goal weight. So typically when people are trying to give some background on the situation, they start with the highest weight that they were ever recorded at. Almost every time, that is not the weight that somebody is when they go through surgery, especially because there's the pre-op diet, and in a lot of circumstances, you have to go through a rigorous weight loss process before you can actually go through surgery, especially if you're going through insurance in the States, for example. This is why people tend to distinguish between their highest weight and their surgery weight on social media. Then, of course, whatever their current weight is at the time they're making the post, and whatever they personally have chosen or their doctors have chosen for their goal weight. Number 10 are the food phases. So very quickly, when people are talking about whether or not they're in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or phase 4 of their eating, what they're referring to is the post-op stages in which you're supposed to introduce food back into your system. Phase 1 is clear liquids. So right after surgery, you're on clear liquids like Gatorade, Crystal Light, water, apple juice, broth, things like that. Phase 2, you move on to thick liquids, and that's when you can start adding things like protein shakes or very, very blended and strained soups, yogurts, and I think they even consider like oatmeal and grits as thick liquids as long as you add enough water to them. Phase 3 is when you're in soft solids. Soft solids includes very soft cheeses like cottage cheese, very soft and easy to digest meats like fish, tuna fish, maybe canned chicken, scrambled eggs, although some people do still struggle with scrambled eggs right after surgery, refried beans, mashed potatoes, things like that. And phase 4 is when you can slowly start to introduce solid foods back into your diet. And most of the time when people are talking about phase 4, they'll talk about maybe that first month that they're starting to add food back in, because it should be a very slow, gradual process as you're starting to figure out how things make you feel and which things don't maybe sit very well with you. Number 11 is the loser's bench. A lot of times people will say, "Welcome to the loser's bench," or "I've finally joined the loser's bench." And all they really mean is that they've gone through surgery and now they're on the other side. And for some reason, we call that the loser's bench. Number 12 is pouch. And I discussed this a little bit when I was talking about the different surgeries, but essentially what is left of your stomach and what is the current active portion of your stomach is often referred to as a pouch. Number 13 is the pouch reset. A lot of times people aren't aware of what a reset is or whether or not it's useful. So the gist of it is that a pouch reset is when you really feel like you're kind of out of whack with your eating habits, and maybe you're eating too much or too frequently, and you need a reset. And a lot of times people will work their way back through the food phases where they'll start with liquids and move on, gradually going to solid foods again to reset their pouch. The idea behind the pouch reset is that it shrinks things back down so that you have restriction again and you're kind of resetting your eating habits, but there's really not a lot of medical evidence that this does anything, but it certainly does something for your mental reset. Do you need to drink liquids for a week to reset your mind and reset your food habits? No, absolutely not. I think any sort of buckling down and just being mindful of your food can be a type of mental reset, but that is what people are referring to when they're talking about pouch resets. Number 14, because I just said it and realized it's not on my list, is restriction. So when people talk about restriction, they talk about how little they can eat or that feeling of getting full. So when you have a lot of restriction, it means you really can only eat a certain amount before you start feeling really full. Over time, your restriction will change. You will slowly be able to eat more food over the course of your life. One, your stomach is designed to be able to expand and contract, and that's just naturally what things are going to do. So you will be able to slowly eat more, and if you continue to push it beyond its limits, you can theoretically stretch that out again, probably not to pre-surgery levels, but it can get quite a bit bigger. Number 15 is revision. When people talk about revisions, they are typically talking about going from one prior weight loss surgery to another. A lot of times you see lap band revisions where somebody had the lap band a long time ago, and that is slowly being phased out. A lot of places don't use the lap band anymore. There were complications and problems, and they weren't as successful. And so you'll see people get revisions from a lap band to having that removed and going to either the sleeve or the bypass or one of the other multiple surgeries that there are. Sometimes you'll see people who had the sleeve who are going to a bypass. There are a lot of different reasons that somebody might do this. A lot of times I see it being for GERD and acid reflux problems, but there's a multitude of different reasons why somebody might get a revision to a different kind of surgery. Number 16 is gas pains. When people are talking about gas pains after surgery, I think a lot of the thought process is thinking people are talking about burping and farting. And that certainly comes with the territory, but the gas pains that are specifically being talked about post-op are because your body has to be pumped full of gas to expand and give room for the surgeons to see what they're doing and move organs around. When they pump this into your body, it kind of sits in your stomach cavity and it moves around. People will talk about their shoulder being in a lot of pain because that gas moves up from the body cavity into the shoulders and the back, and you start to feel these really achy sensations. Over time, as you're working the gas out of your system, they can certainly come in the form of farts and burps. But most of the time, it's really just about walking and moving and getting that gas to slowly release out of your body cavity. It's a very strange feeling. It's kind of a body ache, and you can feel things in a way move around. I could feel my gas move upwards in my body as I stood up and walked around. But that's what people are talking about when they're discussing gas pains after surgery. Number 17 is malabsorption. So there is a difference, of course, between the sleeve and the bypass surgeries, but one of the results is that the gastric bypass is a malabsorptive surgery. So by design, the rerouting of your intestines is bypassing the duodenum, the first part of your small intestines, which means that you don't have your food travel through as much of your intestines, which in turn means that you don't absorb all of the calories from your food. And as I said, this is by design, but one of the side effects of that is that you're not just not absorbing all of the calories, you're not absorbing all of the nutrients and vitamins from your food either. That's why vitamins are so important after surgery, especially if you had gastric bypass. It's a malabsorptive surgery, so you need to supplement some of those vitamins and minerals because your body just isn't going to be able to do it on its own. Number 18 is NSAIDs. Everyone talks about how you're not supposed to have NSAIDs after surgery. NSAIDs are non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs. So most commonly things like ibuprofen, Advil, aspirin, those are all NSAIDs. NSAIDs have a higher risk of causing internal ulcers and problems with your stomach just in general. They really are something that you should limit how much you're getting on a normal basis anyway, but after surgery, the ulcer risk is much higher because of the anatomy of our tiny tummies. So you really don't want to take any NSAIDs if you can avoid it, because your stomach lining can be really damaged by those medications post-op. You can have things like acetaminophen, Tylenol. Those are not going to have that same kind of risk to your stomach. Number 19, NSV. NSV stands for non-scale victory. And that's something that I like to talk about in my videos, and is just another way to talk about this process without just looking at numbers or looking at the scale. What are some things outside of the scale that are accomplishments or victories to you? Being able to sit in a booth at a restaurant, or being able to put on a pair of high calf boots that you couldn't in the past. Things that aren't directly related to the scale, but are showing progress and things that you're proud of. And number 20 is tool. You'll hear a lot of people talking about how to use your tool or how to best utilize your tool in this process. And all that means is your new pouch, your new stomach, and the whole surgery in general. This is a tool to help you succeed. It is not a magic pill. It's not the easy way out. It certainly is extremely difficult and frustrating at times, and it's just a tool in your tool belt to help you along the way. It still takes a lot of effort and a lot of preparation and willpower to get through this process. So you want to use your tool wisely, because it was kind of an expensive tool. So that's what I have for a lot of the terminology that I see used all the time. Do you have any other ideas of things that might be used a lot for acronyms or different terminology that I didn't discuss today? Because I would love to see them in the comments. And I think it's a really good opportunity just to fill everyone in, because these are things that we throw around all the time on social media for those of us who are in the know. But if somebody's doing research or trying to figure this stuff out for the first time, they might kind of fall into this trap of not really knowing what it is people are talking about, because they're using too many acronyms or special language that we just kind of are all used to using at this point. Thanks so much for watching. If you are a returning subscriber, thanks so much for being here and supporting the channel and the type of information that I'm trying to get out there about my weight loss surgery progress and what I've experienced since surgery. And if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that you can get notified when my new videos are posted. And for everybody, if you liked this video, please hit the like button to let me know that you like this content and you want to see more. Stay happy, stay healthy, and make sure that you're always looking at the big picture. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.